Supermassive Games' Until Dawn stands as a defining moment not just for the studio, but for the interactive drama horror genre as a whole. Released in 2015, this game broke new ground by combining a cinematic narrative with deeply engaging, player-driven choices. Set in the isolated Blackwood Mountain and featuring a group of friends haunted by past tragedies that they themselves caused, Until Dawn blended horror subgenres with branching storylines, creating an unforgettable experience where every decision had weight. The game allowed players to immerse themselves in a classic horror scenario filled with suspense, danger, and unexpected twists, all while deciding the fate of the characters themselves. This perfect blend of tension, story, and interactivity made Until Dawn a standout success and a unique achievement for Supermassive Games. Despite the studio's attempts to replicate this success with the Dark Pictures anthology and other similar titles, nothing has quite captured the same brilliance. Until Dawn remains Supermassive's most accomplished game, a lightning in a bottle that has proven difficult to recapture. Its immersive narrative, atmosphere, and choice-consequence mechanics set a new standard for the genre, raising expectations for future horror games. But what made Until Dawn so special, and why have Supermassive Games' subsequent efforts failed to live up to the highest bar set by this game? In exploring the success of Until Dawn, it becomes clear that its combination of horror, player choice, and emotional depth was a one-of-a-kind experience that continues to resonate with players to this day. One of the most striking features of Until Dawn is its adept use of classic horror tropes, which the game simultaneously embraces and subverts. Supermassive Games didn't shy away from other familiar elements of slasher films: the remote eerie mountain lodge, the group of young adults on a retreat, and the lurking menace. These tropes, so common in horror cinema, are often predictable. However, Until Dawn used them to its advantage by incorporating them into an interactive experience where the player's choices dictated the outcome. This gave players a sense of control over the horror while also maintaining the tension and suspense that these scenarios typically evoke in films. The game's seamless blending of horror subgenres adds another layer of complexity. What begins as a traditional slasher slowly evolves into a psychological thriller, and then takes a sharp turn into a supernatural horror with the introduction of the Wendigos. This shift keeps players on edge, constantly adjusting their expectations as new layers of the mystery are revealed. What's particularly impressive is how the game manages to balance these different horror elements without feeling disjointed. The transitions between subgenres are smooth, and each new twist enhances the overall experience rather than detracting from it. This ability to play with genre conventions, all while maintaining a cohesive narrative, is a key reason why Until Dawn is so memorable. The game's fixed camera angles and cinematic presentation add to its horror aesthetic, with these camera angles reminiscent of early survival horror games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, create a sense of unease by limiting the player's view of their surroundings. This design choice ensures that the players never feel fully in control of the environment, enhancing the tension and fear as they navigate dark hallways and snow-covered forests. Combined with the game's lighting and sound design, these visual elements contribute to the atmosphere of dread that permeates Until Dawn from start to finish. Moreover, the use of environmental storytelling plays a crucial role in amplifying the horror. The game is filled with clues and objects that hint at the tragic history of Blackwood Mountain, from newspaper clippings about the mysterious disappearance of the Washington sisters, to unsettling Native American lore about the Wendigos. These elements deepen the player's immersion, encouraging them to piece together the backstory while grappling the immediate threats at hand. By rewarding exploration and attention to detail, Until Dawn invites players to engage with its world on multiple levels, making the horror feel more personal and the stakes even higher. At first glance, the characters in Until Dawn appear to be lifted directly from the pages of a slasher film script. You have the jock, the cheerleader, the nerd, the prankster, and the bitch, as well as other familiar archetypes. But what sets Until Dawn apart is its ability to take these stereotypical characters and transform them into semi-complex, multi-dimensional individuals. This transformation is achieved not through the game's writing, but also through the performances of its talented cast. Actors like the ever-popular and ever-brilliant Rami Malek bring depth and nuance to their roles, elevating their characters beyond mere horror movie cliches and making them feel like real people with their own motivations, fears, and flaws. The dynamic relationships between the characters are central to the game's emotional impact, where over the course of the game, players learn more about the characters' backstories and the events that brought them to Blackwood Mountain. Friendships are tested, romantic tensions flare, and old grudges resurface, all while the group is confronted with life or death situations. These interpersonal dynamics give the player's decisions greater weight, as the outcome of each character's arc is directly tied to the choices made throughout the game. By allowing the player to shape the fate of these characters, Until Dawn makes their survival or death feel personal and meaningful. In many ways, the game's characters are a reflection of the player's choices. The branching narrative structure ensures that no two playthroughs are the same, and this is particularly evident in how the characters develop based on the player's decisions. For example, a character who starts out as brash and reckless may become more thoughtful and cautious if the player guides them in that direction. Conversely, a character who seems level-headed may make increasingly irrational decisions under the player's control. This flexibility added to the replayability of Until Dawn, as players are encouraged to experiment with different choices to see how the characters' stories change. This level of emotional engagement with the characters is something that Supermassive Games had struggled to replicate in its later titles. In the Dark Pictures anthologies, for instance, the characters often feel underdeveloped or bland and less relatable, partially due to the shorter runtime of each game. Players have less time to connect with the characters, and as a result, their fates feel much less impactful. In Until Dawn, however, the extended length of the game allows for a deeper exploration of the characters' personalities and relationships, making their survival or demise all the more poignant. Until Dawn sets itself apart with a narrative that masterfully combines multiple horror subgenres while keeping the players engaged through its intricate storytelling. The game's plot is deceptively simple at first. A group of friends return to an isolated mountain lodge 1 year after a mysterious disappearance of its 2 members of their group that they themselves caused, but what begins as a tense reunion quickly spirals into a nightmare as the group is stalked by an unseen menace. As the story progresses, the game introduces layers of complexity, weaving psychological horror, slasher elements, and supernatural terror into a cohesive and gripping narrative. One of the most effective aspects of Until Dawn is its ability to keep players guessing. The game constantly shifts expectations, starting with a standard slasher premise before gradually revealing a more intricate web of mysteries. Early on, players are led to believe that a masked killer is the main threat, but as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that there are deeper forces at play. The introduction of the Wendigo, or Wendigos, a supernatural creature rooted in Native American folklore, adds a chilling twist to the plot. This shift from psychological thriller to supernatural horror keeps the narrative fresh and unpredictable, ensuring that players are never entirely sure what to expect next. The game's use of flashbacks and multiple perspective enhances this narrative depth by alternating between different characters and moments in time. Until Dawn allows players to piece together the larger story at their own pace. The flashback to the events surrounding the Washington sisters' disappearance adds emotional weight to the unfolding horror as players begin to understand the underlying motivations driving the characters and their actions. These narrative shifts are handled with precision, never feeling disjointed or confusing. Instead, they serve to enrich the story, adding layers of mystery and suspense that keeps the player invested. What truly sets Until Dawn apart from other horror games, especially of its time, is how it intertwined its narrative with player choices. The game's butterfly effect system ensures that every decision made by the player has lasting consequences. This mechanic is woven seamlessly into the plot, allowing the player to shape the outcome of the story in ways both large and small. Whether it's choosing to investigate a strange noise or deciding whether to save a fellow character in a life or death moment, every choice impacts the narrative in meaningful ways. This level of interactivity gives the players a sense of ownership over the story, making each playthrough they go through feel unique and personal. From a technical standpoint, Until Dawn was a standout achievement for its time, pushing the boundaries of what was possible on the PlayStation 4. The game's use of motion capture technology brought a level of realism to the characters that was rare in video games at the time, with actors like Rami Malek and Hayden Panettiere lent not only their voices but their full performances to the game, resulting in characters that moved, spoke, and emoted in ways that felt incredibly lifelike. This level of detail helped to create a stronger emotional connection between the player and their characters, as their facial expressions and body language conveyed subtle emotions that added depth to their performances. The visual fidelity of Until Dawn extended beyond just the characters, however, with the game's environments being meticulously crafted to create a sense of dread and isolation. The snow-covered forests, dilapidated buildings, and shadowy interiors of Blackwood Mountain were rendered in stunning detail, with dynamic lighting and weather effects adding to the atmosphere. The game's fixed camera angles, a throwback to classic survival horror games, were used to great effect, often framing the action in ways that heightened the tension and made players feel vulnerable. These design choices contributed to the immersive horror experience, making every step through the game world feel fraught with danger. The game's sound design was another critical component of its technical success, with the game's use of audio cues to signal impending danger kept players on edge. Even moments of silence were used effectively, allowing players to feel the weight of the isolation and dread that permeated this game from start to finish. This attention to detail in the game's sound and visual design was a key factor in creating a tense and terrifying atmosphere that defined Until Dawn. Unfortunately, this technical achievement of Until Dawn has proven difficult for Supermassive games to replicate in their later titles. While games like Man of Medan and House of Ashes have employed similar motion capture techniques, they've often fallen short in terms of visual fidelity and polish. The environments in these later games lack the same level of detail and atmosphere, and the characters' animations sometimes feel less natural and more stilted. As a result, the immersive experience that Until Dawn offered has been diminished in these subsequent titles, contributing to their inability to recapture the magic of the original. While Until Dawn is widely regarded as a near-flawless experience, especially considering Supermassive Games' later entries, there is one personal gripe that is linked for many players of the original: the inability to save Josh Washington, one of the central and most important characters in the entire story of Until Dawn. Throughout the game, players have the opportunity to guide several characters to safety, depending on the choices they make. However, Josh's fate seems sealed from the outset, with no real opportunity for redemption or survival, even if players uncover all the clues and handle interactions perfectly. This limitation can feel frustrating, especially given the game's emphasis on player choice and control. Josh's descent into madness is a tragic arc, one that feels as though it could have been resolved differently with more player agency. The game does an excellent job of building sympathy for Josh, especially once the player learns of the emotional trauma he endured following the loss of his beloved sisters. However, the lack of an option to fully save him leaves a lingering sense of dissatisfaction, as players are denied the chance to offer him the same salvation they can for other characters. This singular oversight, while thankfully fixed in the remake, stands as a small blemish on an otherwise stellar game. Until Dawn represents a unique blend of cinematic storytelling, player choice, and horror that Supermassive Games has not yet been able to replicate in their later projects. The game's intricate plot, deeper character development, and atmospheric setting combined to create an unforgettable experience, one that has become a touchstone in interactive drama and horror gaming even to this day. Its butterfly effect system, which gave weight to every player decision, set a new standard for choice-based games. And while Supermassive Games have continued to explore similar territory in their subsequent titles, none have managed to recapture the lightning in the bottle that Until Dawn delivered. It remains a masterpiece in its genre, a masterpiece of Supermassive Games' gamography, and one that continues to stand out in the studio's portfolio despite its few imperfections.
Oh, track of my love.